Master of the change dances and destroys, just to leave room for the new to bloom. Sing before it's gone. Hello, dear friends. Since many of you share your thoughts with me, it seems many are wondering these days about the same thing. Should we fight back, like, for example, the truckers in Canada, or should we rather hide in the wilderness and keep quiet until the storm is over? So I will try to give you some hints on the best course of action, based of course on the prophecies, this time of Ephraim Syrian, and I'll try to cover some of the current news which are so much identical to the prophecies that it's kind of difficult to differentiate. Is this a prophecy video or is it current news video? So this is a slightly different type of protest, the freedom convoys, the truck convoys. They really threaten a little bit the establishment, unlike the peaceful street processions, which are basically people shouting for a couple of hours and then going home. The massive convoys, unlike the short peaceful protests, they can really disrupt the plans, the schemes of the Satanists, and that's why they will and they are taking serious measures. So if you participate in something like this, you risk being targeted by very nasty weapons. A couple of years ago, they used biological weapons when the protests in Greece became serious, and those inflict terrible damages. Recently, we heard that in Australia they were using some sort of beams of energy and from distance burned the people. Luckily on the skin only, but do you doubt that they have beams that can burn the people completely? Of course they have, and even nastier things they have. They just don't want to use them until it is not absolutely necessary, because the majority of the sheep still believe them more or less, so they kind of still try to keep some sort of image in front of the society. But if they're approached by a freedom convoy that really threatens them, they will not hesitate to use even the nasty things. So keep in mind what you are risking if you participate in anything like this. And the second most important point is that even if these convoys turn successful, hypothetically, the most they could do is just delay a little bit the satanic plan. It cannot derail it. It can only make it slightly milder in a given area. Why it cannot derail it? Because by far the majority of the adults on this earth have already sworn a vow of loyalty to Satan and have accepted part of him in their blood. That's beyond return, and this will not just evaporate no matter what kind of freedom convoy people organize. And some people are so gullible that they think that just because the bug and fix campaign will come to an end in a few months or a couple of years, that will be the end of the satanic plan. No, it will not be. They have put these things in the blood to recruit cyborgs, and they had success, I think, beyond their expectation. So what do you think? They will not use their cyborgs? They will. And for what? They will not let them just graze green grass in the forest. It will be something ugly and cruel instead. And that's why those who are preaching that just join with your truck and we will defeat the globalists in this way. Such people don't understand what is the enemy. They don't understand that they are dealing with black magic, because that's what it ultimately boils down to. the technology used to manage and manipulate these cyborgs, this works on black magic, turning the human species into something else. It's dangerous to base your decisions on the advice of people who are saying that, you see, the Satanists are failing, that's why they're scrapping some of the bug and fix rules. We defeated them, you see. Actually, the Satanists will put an end to the bug and fix campaign just because it did whatever they expected. It gave them access to people's blood, it's all accomplished, and then put an end to that theater just to start another one. And all this was already written in the document of the World Health Organization, which I showed you in previous episodes. This entire step-by-step plan was laid out. And all of this is but a prelude to the main fiasco, which is about to follow. And the people who are convincing you that the prelude is over and that means that there will be no main fiasco, these are people who are afraid to face reality. So be wise and don't let them drag you to the ditch with their short-sightedness. Now just imagine Canadian truckers had a complete success. They overthrow their tyrannical dictator. They completely scrap the entire system with the passes and marking and everything. And then what? They will simply have another tyrant, of course, again appointed by the same fellows who appointed the current one. And it will be for a short time just a very milder tyranny, like, for example, the way it was 5 years ago, which will simply change the approach of the Satanists. They will have another plan with a different type of deceit, probably, which is not that easy to spot. And they will go slow, but at the end we will reach where we are now, because that's what they constantly do. Their head cannot generate anything else. And this movement of the Canadian truckers, they're simply not spiritually enlightened enough and not organized enough to be able to come up with another government which consists only of people who are absolutely noble, who can recognize and refuse everything satanic, even when they are offered billions in bribe. Because let's say we are in this hypothetical situation that they have overthrown the tyrant and now they need somebody else as head of the state. Actually, the entire idea that they actually don't need the head of a state, even that they are, most of them, unable to comprehend, although that's the truth. There should be no heads of state who have that much power over people's lives as we have now. But anyhow, we are not even going there for now. Because then they will think that otherwise it will be chaos. They will feel they need somebody. Okay, they need somebody. It's good to have somebody at this point. But how will they recognize a person who will never bow down and join the Satanists even when he is bribed and threatened? The common people do not have the vision to recognize, because the leader proposed by the Satanists, he will also say, oh, I'm saintly like that. And what will happen is that Canada will reach basically where it was. And the entire thing, as I said, will only delay and not derail the swelling of the parasitic cancer. Think twice. Is it worth to spend your time and energy on such initiatives? And let's see how Ephraim, the Syrian, describes the people who will defy the cancer. He said, whatever noble people would have been still left at that time, when they hear about the arrival of the nasty lizard in flesh and blood, most of them will run as far as possible and as fast as possible in the desert, in the sands, in the mountains and in the cave, and they will cover their heads with soil and ashes, and day and night they will spend in austerity and humbleness. This is how the benevolent God will ensure their survival. He will lead them, He will point the way to remote places of safety.
D'água secando bonito quando tem luar.
Now I will read a bit more from the prophecies of Ephraim Syrian, and more precisely the part where he describes the antichrist. Ephraim wrote, "And now, my friends, let's see in what disguise the shameless lizard will descend on earth. That will be after the Savior was born from a virgin in human form. When the enemy of the human race found out about the descent of the Lord, he decided to trick all people, and he will get born from unclean woman, and will pose and pretend to be saintly. He will put up a show and pretend to be very modest and attentive to detail. He will pretend to have a despise to unjust speech. He will seem to be very respectful, and he will show compassion to the poor. He will pretend to be spotlessly honest and very kind to everybody's needs. Very cleverly he will deceive all people. He will never show his anger. He will not accept gifts and bribes. He will always wear a mask of joyfulness. He will never show himself in bad mood in public. And when the people of all nations see all these qualities in one single person, they will decide that there is no other person on earth who will deserve more to be their king, because he will appear to be so soft and so full of justice. Most people will remain loyal to him no matter what, and they will encourage all their friends and family to worship and praise what is actually disgust personified, to the point of jumping onto the relatives who do not worship him and stabbing them with knives. In those times there will be no rain falling from the skies. The earth will give no fruit, the springs will dry up, the rivers will evaporate, the herbs will stop appearing, they will not grow, the trees will die, rotting from their roots, there will be no fruit on them, the fishes in the sea and the other sea creatures will all perish. Because of that, there will be a terrible stink everywhere and desperate cries of people in horror. Before all that comes to pass, God will send prophets to warn the people, but mostly people will ignore them. Oh, brothers, we'll have to stay firm in our determination when we see the river of fire violently tossing the hills and the valleys. Fires will burn the rivers, even the sea will evaporate, the winds will be wild, the stars will fall, the sun will run out of power, the moon will perish, and the skies will fold up like a scroll. So in the set books of Jane Roberts, we have an indication as of when the second coming, Christ now was born again in flesh. Now he should be some 45 years of age, give or take a couple of years. And actually this old text of Ephraim Syrian also suggests, like one other, that the Antichrist, the Dajjal, will be somewhat younger, because it always says he will appear after he hears that the Lord has descended already in flesh. So he also comes in flesh. So I can think of at least 3-4 sources suggesting that the Dajjal will be somewhat younger than Christ. But anyhow, keeping in mind everything we read in the previous episodes, it will be very, very easy to recognize him no matter what is his actual age. Also, I found interesting quote from Peter Dunoff saying that the first coming was in the Middle East, but now Christ will get born amongst the Caucasian people, amongst the European race, There was Islamic source also mentioning something like that. And then Danov continues, but if they, the Caucasian people, do not accept him, the yellow race will take over them and will beat them up. What does Peter Danov mean by the yellow race beating the Caucasians up? He means the takeover of Russia and also this millions in count army of China, which will reach Europe and fight here. What are they gonna do? They're not gonna cook and serve sweets to the locals. As Sutrov Vyacheslav revealed for us, towards the very end, before Christ openly appears, it will be constant twilight, because the days will be so short. By the time the sun rises, it will be time for sunset, and also the nights will be so short that it will be like in the northern regions now, constant twilight. And those who have done sacred plants, they know that actually when it's dark you see better, when you see with the astral vision. And with that same vision, which will be opening towards those times for all people, they will see the Lord glowing in that twilight, almost all of them simultaneously, glowing and finally revealing himself to all the people. And as far as I understand, he is already amongst us. Sometimes he talks with people, and sometimes even about Jesus, allegedly 2000 years ago. Actually, it was 1000, it seems. And they even tried to correct him. No, no, actually, Jesus said like that. I'll explain to you because I'm a Bible expert. And I don't know what exactly kind of outfit will he wear when he reveals himself. But it will be very funny after that when he shows you the old photos of now, when he wears suit, and sometimes he has the proper natural clothes people should wear, then just the coat of the suit on the top to make it look a bit more okay. But it will be very funny when he shows us photos of the times when he was trying to blend with us and even wore our funny tight suits. And back to timing, according to Seth, there will be one very intense period which our generation will witness, and then few smaller purges of parasites and mostly parasitic ideas from the society. And then he says that as the new social structures appear, life after 2075 will be the way we now describe paradise or the new age. And at that time, Christ will be around the age of 100. And now, reading the headlines of the news. Canadian councillor calls the truckers terrorists. New Zealand threatens to seize property if the fines for the bug test non-compliance are not paid. Canadian government threatening to seize accounts of people who are against the tyranny. We are definitely at the threshold of the tribulation. Exactly as it is described in the Bible, that they will set up the satanic electronic Dajjal system before his arrival, so that when he comes, the only thing he needs to do is issue the passports. And I find it astonishing how accurate are the prophecies. They were even telling us on what charges they will be prosecuting the noble people, on charges of terrorism, and they already start preparing the ground for the public to convince the public that it is indeed so. They are stripping non-fixed people of human rights. And actually, many folks are who are still considered normal. They're even convinced that the non-fixed people are responsible for the entire pandemic. If insanity has escalated so much even before the most interesting part has begun, then I really think it will be exactly as Ephraim Syrian wrote. Such people will be stabbing their children or parents with knives. And do you remember the words of Mary Julie Jehani? By doing so, they will think that they are doing great service to humanity. And while this unbelievable madness is unfolding, here is how Alex Jones is helping his friends, whom he calls globalists. Headlines from his website: the globalists are losing, but what is next? Alex Jones' deceit is unbelievably sly. Because, yes, the pests, they will lose at the end. However, those who follow Alex Jones, they will not be amongst the winners. He is slowly leading them into a very dangerous swamp, because he very well exposes the plans of the pests, which is even worse for his followers, because then they are accepting the Dajjal membership knowingly, which is quite a different thing. Everybody understands that committing crime consciously and unconsciously are quite different things. So he keeps deceiving the people that just by knowing what the pests are doing, you are a resistance and you are against it. Just by not approving it, which is of course not so. You may not approve the JAL membership, but the point is that you will be there. In the satanic club, when they tell you that you will be left jobless without electricity, etc. And all Alex Jones makes sure is that people are not prepared for that, and it is only high spiritual consciousness which can allow them survive in such an unsure environment of being expelled from the society. And Alex Jones is the last person who can provide spiritual guidance, because he himself has obvious psychological problems, full of anger, full of hatred towards his entourage. Anger is the fast track highway to hell, and that's where he's leading his followers. And another point which came in the Ephraim Syrian and a couple of other prophecies is that basically Dajjal will appoint loyal demons as heads of the different regions, and they will give small allowances of food to the marked people only. Keep in mind that was written according to mainstream sources almost 2000 years ago. Well, probably in reality it was just 8 or 700 years ago. But even at that time, he saw our current welfare system. And I see this unfolding in many places. In US, they're cornering the people in such a way that they will continue to stay in the city. They're giving them money for free just to stay caged in the city and not to move to the land where they will be independent. And in the area where I just arrived, it is basically a poor area. There has been almost no central welfare ever here. But now, since a couple of years, they actually started giving something to the poor people. And here in the village region, I see that the fate of the poor people in the government is growing. And they say, yes, they are schmucks, but at least they started feeding us sometimes. So the welfare trap is properly set, and the victims enter in it with a big smile. So a recent development in the unfolding of the satanic curriculum was to raise the public awareness that indeed it is all about devil worship in the classic sense. The examples are countless in schools. Small kids are enrolled in Devil's Club, a very trendy world-level rock group is openly telling its followers that every song is a ritual to Satan. And actually, they are aiming at transparency on many levels. Like the official medical data makes it crystal clear that actually the fixed people are more likely to get the bug, and still people are queuing up at the fixation places. So the disgusting lizards are taking full advantage of this remarkable blindness to insult the intelligence of the people and make it clear that in our club it's gonna be like that. Well, their hard work of TV grooming for decades is now paying off. For example, here I heard the villagers talk about the god and the devil, and one of them was laughing. Ah, we don't need this god. All the good stuff is with the devil. And he was hinting at sex. But the truth is that the last thing that the Dajjal wants is the people to enjoy normal sex. Why? Because all these higher stages of altered divine consciousness, high vibrations, for which now the yogis need to go to the caves and smear themselves with the mud and ashes and meditate for years, this very same state of ecstatic consciousness was actually the daily norm when the humans were still normal. And the way they were tapping to that ecstatic energy was through family life, like a normal family, and not the hysteric drama modern imitation. And that's why these Satanists, they are breeding special kinds of vegetables that reduce fertility and put all these things in the food, and they're convincing in all possible means to live alone or with a friend of the same gender, because they know that if a male and a female live in harmony and love each other, they're very stable. They become a stronghold of harmony and truth, because so is the law of God. Harmony, purity, no quarrel. These are all Satwik qualities, and when one lives in that paradigm, such a person also gets stable mind, which is always happy and difficult to deceive. And not like this poor villager here in the village who, of course, watches TV every second of his life when he is free. Anyway, he is miserable and alone and doesn't get any sex either. But it's a waste of time to even try to talk to such people. The souls of the TV watchers are lost. And by the way, I also noticed in the official headlines, even the laymen are figuring out that the bug is also damaging the sexual potency of the people, something which I, of course, would have never doubted from the very beginning, because when they make these bugs, they're especially targeting the Kundalini. And that's why they have demonized so much the sacred plants. Because if you start reading about various sacred plants, actually most of them are officially categorized as aphrodisiacs. In reality, all of them are, just not instantly. And that's because they're working directly with Kundalini. To open the astral vision, they need to strengthen, or should I say actually repair Kundalini, because normally in the human species, open third eye is the normal state. So the sacred plants just repair that damage. Well, probably we are not in the right historic moment for me to preach to live in a normal family, because nowadays it's even hard to find any human of any age or gender who will remain loyal to the benevolent God until the end. What to speak of creating a family now? But I'm talking about this because in this series, lots of the prophecies are made by saints who were part of the church. And many churches are against sex, which is a perversion. Demonizing this type of harmony is heresy. And actually, like for example, Paisis Svetogorets, whose prophecies we read in the previous episode, he's a major saint. He's canonized in a couple of Orthodox churches. And although he spent his life working in the monastery, still, without mentioning names, his overall impression of the church was also not very high. So do not confuse the saints with the church. That's the point I wanted to make. And a bit of wisdom from Sayert, whose visions I published earlier on the topic of why the pests, the parasites, burn the forests. They set them on fire. The thing is that the very parasitic existence is based on black magic. Although the small players in human form may not understand that fully, because they are just possessed and don't understand that these are not their own thoughts, that they're remotely controlled. But the big demons who actually do possess them on the other end, that hellish army trained in hell, they're not comfortable in forest environment because the trees are alive, and the trees, they're a Satwik and pure species. And basically, when these demons, when they're in forest environment, they're not that strong because this entire forest for them, the environment is as if they're on a lap of a giant Satwik entity, because the roots of the trees, they are intertwined underground and they actually grow into each other, something similar to what the botanists do and call it grafting. Most people have heard about experiments of the type that even in the commercial fields, the wheat, when there is an invasion of some pests or some sort of enemy, the corner of the field which is invaded first, it kind of transmits signals to the rest of the entities and that there is danger approaching. So if the relatively simple plants of the wheat can do that much, can you imagine how sophisticated is actually the nervous system of the trees? Like, for example, in Africa, trees which are grazed upon by the giraffes, not only they generate some sort of bitter or unpleasant enzymes when the giraffes start biting on them to repel them, but they also transmit that to the other trees in the vicinity who start producing that unpleasant taste in the leaves even before the giraffe reaches them. So it's enough that he bites only the first tree. And this is just but a short fraction of what more sophisticated plant entities can do. The shamans in the past, they had a good knowledge of it. The modern science is very much behind on it. All they say is that there is some system which very much resembles a nervous system, although it is not centralized like in the animal kingdom. But what is it doing, that they have not figured out much yet. Basically, the entire world, which most people call tangible, it is nothing else but an external form of the sum total of the thoughts of all entities who reside here. The biggest lie, the biggest scam of the modern so-called science is that it has convinced the people that they are at the mercy of the natural elements and that disasters, for example, befall them by chance. There is nothing like that. Even a small blade of grass does not move in the wind without some entity in some form causing that beforehand. And the parasites, they know about the magical side of the plants, and they don't want more Satwik entities which will be uplifting the overall consciousness level on Earth. That's why they have been actively eradicating the forests for decades now, amongst other reasons on other levels, of course. So during the last 2 years, they quickly made up all these new inhumane laws under the pretext of the bug. And in reality, in many countries, they're not really enforced. I mean, the people simply do not cooperate, and when it is in millions, they cannot enforce them. Or when sometimes there is too much backlash from the public, they just cancel them after a few days. And this was kind of to be expected because currently, probably most adults on Earth are already possessed, but this transition from a human to cyborg, it seems that it takes a couple of years, so they have not completely lost their minds. I mean, a lot of the protests are actually by fixed people. So this is the situation, and in some countries they even scrapped the laws. However, too many people are misjudging the situation when they saw them scrapping some laws while adding many other even worse at the same time, maybe not necessarily bug related, but tyranny laws. And the people who are deceived into thinking that you can just imagine anything and it will happen tomorrow or at latest the day after, still too many people, even from my viewers, believe in that. They're all convinced that now the tribulation is cancelled when some nonsense law is scrapped. They are just looking for any excuse not to prepare and not to do the spiritual preparations for the tribulation, because that contradicts their ideas of spirituality, and many such people will be caught unprepared, and whoever is caught unprepared travels to the slaughterhouse. You see, the army of the disgusting lizards, they had it all planned out in great detail. It is already in that document of the World Health Organization, which took them a very long time to compile. Over there, they knew about the backlash. They were even prepared in the worst case scenarios to have international armies enforcing these laws. However, the people accepted the nonsense voluntarily without much pressure, actually. But the senior lizards, they know very well that there will be always some fraction of the people who will resist, who will not accept the nonsense no matter what. So at some point during the next few weeks, the next few months, or the next couple of years, they will scrap completely all the bug nonsense because it has done its work. Most of the people are marked now. If they have consented to the first shot, surely they will go for the regular shots, which will be now every year or every few months. Eventually, they may even scrap the rule for the regular shots as well, because as Vyacheslav said in the beginning, people will be getting severely ill after the alleged treatments, but at a later stage, they will start dropping dead straight away on the spot. And after that, they will stop going there, but it doesn't really matter because they have the nanoparticles in their blood, which means that when they offer them the one world passport, they will accept it. So friends, please do not be fooled if there is a transition to a different stage in their lizard plan. Don't think the tribulation is over. Do your homework. This is a scientific formulation of what I have been warning you since years. Stay away from the possessed people. Buy all you need for 10 years and don't interact with them anymore. Build an enclosure for chicken so that you have fresh eggs. That's an easy fresh nutrition. And returning to the original first question on which this video was based, should we bother to participate in trucker-style convoys? If you have prepared everything and you even have your chicken barn ready, maybe. Or maybe it is better to just, as Ephraim Syrian said, just hide and cover your head with mud, which by the way is not as funny as it sounds, because mud and all this clay, all these materials, not only they isolate against 5G and the other lizard vibrations, but I think, keeping in mind what is just now on the screen, The possessed people will not want to talk to you when you're smeared with mud, and I think that is the most important. Recently, I also noticed that using the proxy of people who are possessed or even not yet fixed but still a bit weak, these people are used by the lizards who are pulling the black magic invisibly for most people to create quarrels between the noble people who might be getting together at this point more and more. Please divorce yourself more and more from the company of the possessed people. You can still do it gradually now. Later on, it will be painful, especially when they are your family members. Not all of the unfixed people will remain loyal to the benevolent God until the end. Indeed, most of them will eventually convert to the dark side. So now it could be still a bit difficult to see who is on the right path and who is not amongst the non-fixed. But still, covering your head with mud seems to be the best course of action. And if you have watched the entire EndTimes series, all of the episodes until the end, and if you still have some questions, you can send me a very short note, not more than 4 or 5 sentences, here on this email. Thank you for listening.
Oj,